Okay, the Hebraism, real quick, a couple of them I'm going to go through. Some of them are easy, some will take a little bit longer to explain. This one is to put the name upon, to put God's name. And this is why the Tetragrammaton is so important, because when God's name goes on something, it shows his ownership, that he owns it. And this is why God has even put his name on Jerusalem. He's put his name on Israel to show that this is the nation and the land that he has given to the Jews, and he's put his name on it. And so the idea then becomes an idiomatic expression. It's not literally going on the person, but it's the idea that God is saying, I own this. This is what I own. And his name eventually, one of the rewards that we get if we earn these rewards is that his name will be upon us. And somehow in eternity that shows a special rewarding that we're his property. All of his children are his property, but it's a special thing to have his name on you. But one of the things in terms of rewards to have his name upon you is to have authority. And so when you have God's name on you, it means that you have authority. And so that's one of the rewards that it's coalescing with is whatchamacallit, not just ownership, but authority. The person now has authority because they're acting in the name of God. One of the things I'll make about this whole thing about Israel is, the context is a priestly blessing, Numbers 6:22 through 27. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you. So they shall put my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them. So when God says, I own the children of Israel, he still owns them, and this is why there's so much anti-Semitism in the world, because God has put his name on them. And again, this is another reason why people that are not very spiritual cannot stand the Jewish people. And this is one of the answers for anti-Semitism, is because God's ownership is on them. So when they see a Jewish person, they see God's ownership. Just like when they see a true believer, they see God's ownership on you as well. So both the church and Israel reflect that. Israel a little bit more, because Israel is very distinct as far as outward appearance. They dress a certain way, especially in Israel. They'll wear the yarmulkes or whatnot, so they're very distinctive. Whereas a Christian can really blend in, and the only way you'll probably know a Christian is what they say and do. But Jewish people are very distinct, and so that marks them out many times as being God's property, obviously. But the other thing, too, let me talk about this as far as it relates to Israel. So for instance, the land of Israel has God's name on it, and if you look at the valleys that form over Jerusalem, it has the Hebrew shin on it, which had the idea of God's stamp of his name on it, and so you look at the Kidron Valley, Triropian Valley, and Himnon Valley, and it forms that letter in Hebrew as God's stamp on Jerusalem. So this is why the land is contested. Now, to go back to a Deuteronomy 32 idea, so we can understand how God puts his name on the land, at the Tower of Babel, God sent and dispersed all the nations by confusing the languages and sent them according to the sons of God. He scattered them according to the very deities that they were worshiping. And basically then, by chapter 12, he starts a new nation with a nation of Israel from Abraham. And what God does then is he gives the rest of the world to these Gentile nations and to these gods that they're following. He just kind of gives them over. It's kind of a Romans 1 thing to the nations. He gives them over. And then basically he says, I'm going to now establish my people and my land. And this is what he says. This is the land I'm giving to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and his descendants, but my name is on that. I own that. And I've given everything else to the Gentiles. I am now segueing this piece of land, this piece of property for me. So the issue about Israel, of why this belongs to the Jews, is because God says, I put my name on it. It's mine. I am calling ownership for this. and I'm telling who is allowed to be on it, the Jews. And so this is forever. This is, when God puts his stamp on there and shows ownership, it is forever. He never rescinds it. He never abrogates it. And so this is the issue that we're having today, is people don't understand these concepts of putting my name on stuff. They think that, Israel disobeys and his name's not on them anymore. It still is on him. His name's still on them, and because it's a permanent thing. So when God says I own it, he owns it. He doesn't not own it anymore. And so I want you to understand that, because we're getting more and more people not understanding the nation of Israel, not understanding the land of Israel, and coming against Israel. But, I mean, if you look at the Hebraisms, it's clear what's going on here. Again, theological insight marks them as belonging to God, places them under God's authority, grants them covenantal protection and privilege. And so you're owned by God, and so you have covenantal ownership and privilege under the new covenant, all spiritual aspects, obviously, and all privileges that are in there, which is obviously putting you under the ownership of Messiah, which means you're not under the ownership of Satan. And like I said on Sunday, before you got saved, you were under the ownership of Satan. Satan owns you. He has authority. He had authority over you, and now you don't, because you belong to God now. But not everybody belongs to God. So the concept of you hear from the world saying, well, everybody's a child of God. No, they're not. They're not a child of God. Only believers are children of God. And only God owns them if they come to faith in them. If not, their ownership belongs to Satan. They belong to the kingdom of darkness. And that's what Ephesians tries to point out. John 17:11, Jesus prays, Holy Father, keep them through your name, those who you have given me. Again, that's ownership. Revelation 14, have his Father's name written on their foreheads, is another mark of ownership. Revelation 22, his name shall be on their foreheads. Again, that's ownership, but that's also reward, representing authority. And so when you see this, then when you look at the book of Revelation, then you look at the mark of the beast is a counterfeit to God's actual mark. Now, in the spiritual realm, can they see the mark of God, the name of? Yeah, they can. They can discern the demons, fallen angels. They can see who belongs to God and who doesn't. That's very clear. They know that. It's very clear that they can see who doesn't belong to God. It was just like that one old boy in the book of Acts was trying to exorcise demons, and they said, Paul I know, but you I don't. Right? And so they discerned, and they can see their mark. Now, people that have been involved in the occult also can tell the difference between believers and unbelievers. They'll say that in the spirit realm, believers have a glow to them. And not an aura, but a glow. Witches have said this, pagan occultists have said this, and they can see in the spiritual realm those who belong to God, which would make sense. The other thing then also, those who have been involved in the spiritual realm and the occult can also see bad things around people. They can also see demons that are following people, demons that are attached to people, and their dark shadows and whatnot. So what I'm saying is, this principle is unseen by you, but in the spiritual realm, it's seen by everybody. Everybody sees the ownership. Everybody understands who's who. Everybody understands what side they're on, but it's invisible to us. But if you could see the spiritual realm, you can see who belongs to who. And so that's a kind of an easy Hebraism to understand. Another Hebraism that's fairly easy to understand is found in Judges. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes, which is kind of the theme of Judges. And the idea is that right in their own eyes is kind of going back to Adam and Eve, is that they become a god unto themselves of making their own rules. And we would call this moral relativism, but that's the common term. But the biblical term is right in your own eyes. People just do what they think is right according to them. They become a god unto themselves. And so it obviously, when people are doing that, is an affront to God, because God's the one who makes the rules. He's the creator. He gets to tell us what's right and wrong. We don't get to do that. But what Judges is trying to do is show you that they keep doing this. They keep doing this. And they'll go through cycles in Judges. You'll see this cycle of, I do right in my own eyes. I get in trouble. I then want God to bail me out. God bails me out. I get free for a period of time, and then I start it again. And this cycle keeps going. And I can't remember if I counted 9 cycles that happen in Judges. And each time they go spiraling down even worse, and they keep going in these cycles because they keep doing what's right in their own eyes, and it makes it progressively worse further and further and further. And where does it go? When you follow the pattern in Judges of cycling worse and worse and worse, and everyone doing wrong in their own right in their own eyes, it leads to a king, a desire for a king. And you can almost imagine why. Because God wanted the nation of Israel to be governed by his laws and his rules, and they wouldn't need a king. He could be their only king. And you would think, why would you want to trade that? I mean, you have more freedom, just obey God, and you don't have to have a king. And so what ends up happening is they keep spiraling down, and this moral relativism ends up with them wanting a king. And that's a pattern we all should understand. Because when everyone starts doing right in their own eyes, that means you need more laws. Right? That's like when you go into an airplane and you go into the bathroom and it has all these rules in the bathroom. Don't smoke, don't touch this, don't look at this, don't try to put this out or whatever. And it has all these rules in the bathroom. And you're like, why is there all these rules in the bathroom? Just go to the bathroom. What's wrong with people? Because you know why? All those rules are because there are constant incidences of people doing stupid things in the toilet, in the airplane. You know, smoking, they say don't vape, don't smoke, don't do this, don't do drugs, whatever. And the problem is that's what people are doing in airplanes. And that's why there's all these rules. Because what people are doing is right in their own eyes. So then what requires is more laws. So the more moral relativism you have in a culture, the more laws you will need to curtail the behavior, because everybody starts doing stupid things. Don't walk in the grass. They walk on the grass. It's just all these weird laws, and it's like, this is ridiculous. Yeah, it's because people keep doing it. And what ends up happening is when you go to moral relativism, you move to tyranny. Because eventually, a strong man is needed to arrest the out-of-control behavior, if you're following me. You have to eventually have a strong man saying, wait a second, this is totally out of control. You can't just keep doing anything you want. You can't just shoot up at the park where kids are playing and throw your hypodermic needle down so a kid can step on it. We need to stop this. And what ends up happening is you don't get more freedom, you get less freedom, because the strong arm has to come in and control people's behavior. Hence, a king is necessary. And hence, by the end of Judges, they're wanting a king. And I know it says they want a king like the other nations, but the reason the other nations need kings is because they also do what is right in their own eyes, and so they need a strong man. So you can see with that principle how we're building to a strong man. We are not building toward more freedom. We are building to totalitarianism. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but yeah, if everyone practiced Judeo-Christian principles, you would actually have more freedom, and you would need less leaders to control people's behavior. The problem is when you let anyone do anything they want, you will need more control. And hence, that's what California's turning into. It's turning into a totalitarian state. And that's what the United States will eventually turn into. That's what Europe is turning into. That's what the West is turning into because of moral relativism. And they'll say, well, what do you care what I do? It's this. Whatever you're doing doesn't stay behind closed doors. Whatever you're doing will spill out in the street, and you will start affecting everyone around you. And that's exactly what we see from every sin they allow. You allow gay marriage, now we have pedophilia. I mean, it just keeps going on and on and on. You allow transgenderism, now we have men and girls sports, right? It just keeps going on. And you don't fix the voting, and I hope like Trump eliminates this mail-in ballot stuff. You don't follow the rules of voting. You have mail-in ballots. All chaos breaks loose, and you can't trust your voting results. Stuff like that. You know what I mean? It just keeps getting worse. And hence, I'm not trying to be pessimistic. I'm just telling you, if they continue to push moral relativism in our public schools and our colleges and academia and whatever, you're going to end up in a totalitarian state. Because where am I getting that from? I'm getting it from the book of Judges. That's where I'm getting it from. But the strong man is coming, and you know who the strong man is. It is the Antichrist. And they will plead for him to get control of everything. If you don't get control of economics, if you don't get control of immigration, if you don't get in control of all these things that are going on in our world, a strong man will be needed to do it. And that is exactly where we're all heading, especially Europe. Europe is begging for a strong man. They're out of control. Their leaders stink. I mean, the worst leaders you could possibly imagine in Europe. And that's not an accident. They have produced those types of people. And so this is a big deal. It's bigger than what we think. And that's what we're seeing today. Okay, let's move on to the next one. A man after his own heart. Now, this is said to be about David. And David, obviously, is not perfect. He had sinned in his life many times. He had sinned grievously with Bathsheba and having Uriah put on the front lines and killed to cover up the whole thing. Well, with all that's going on in David's mindset, how can he still be called a man after God's own heart? Well, again, a man after God's own heart is a Jewish idiom. And it doesn't mean perfection. It never has meant perfection. That's not what the biblical writers are trying to say, or that he never sins. It means that he's aligned with God's will and purposes and covenants. Okay, and that the overall thrust of David's life is he desires to obey. Yeah, are there times where he disobeys and screws up? Totally. But it's the general direction of David's life that he always wants to obey. He wants to go back in covenant. He wants to follow what the Lord's doing. Unlike, his predecessor, Saul, who Saul just did anything he wanted to do. Whatever was right for the occasion, he did it. He didn't care what the covenant said. He didn't care what God said. If he wanted to go talk to a witch and get spiritual insights from necromancy, he did it. He didn't care. David wouldn't do that. David sinned. No doubt about that, okay? And covered it up. And for 9 months was trying to cover it up. But what did David do? He came back to the Lord. And so the general trend of what we're looking for with us is not so much that we fall. It's the fact that what direction are we going in? And if you're going in the right direction, I'm trying to obey. I'm trying to do what I can. If I do fall, I get back up. I repent. I confess, and I get moving in the right direction. That is an individual after God's own heart. So so we're talking about believers, okay? I'm not talking about unbelievers. So what would it look like for a believer to not be someone after God's own heart? It would be someone that got saved and decides to live for their own agenda. It decides that this life is about money, it's about position, it's about having things, it's about power, it's about all this other stuff that they're doing in their life. And not once have they even considered that what they're doing is off the agenda that God wants them to have. We have tons of people that I know, guys, that have been saved, and I'm not doubting their salvation, but they are totally living a worldly life. maybe they darken the door of Rock Harbor maybe 3 or 4 times a year. They would still claim that this is their church. But that's about all they have. And what are they doing? When you look at their lives are just full of all these activities they're doing. They're full of just junk. They're doing a lot of stuff that's not going to be significant in the future as far as eternity is concerned. They think it is. And, they're striving to retire early. They're striving to make as much money as they can. Ambition's a good thing, but when ambition takes you away from God, you got a problem. We got to be ambitious, no doubt about that, but it can't make me cross the line to where I forget God, right? And that's a problem. It's good to make money, fine, you got to provide, but how much is enough from you, man? Is $2 million enough? Is $3 million enough? How about 4? How about 5 million? Is that enough for you? How much is enough? What would you be satisfied with? Because in their minds, whatever they have right now is still not enough. You get my point? Whatever they have right now is still not enough. They want just a little bit more. So they're going to work 20 more hours, or they're going to go for this position that pulls them out of the church for the next 6 months because they got to have a higher position, and they want to retire at a higher level in money. I'm going to tell you something about retirement. We are not meant to retire. We are meant to serve until we're taken home. This idea of retiring early and not doing anything with your life and then set and sell early in life, that is unbiblical. 6 days shall you labor, and 1 day shall you rest, is the idea. But if the whole goal of your life is to retire early so you can do nothing but fish, there's something wrong. There's something wrong with your agenda. I'm not saying leisure time is good. It is. I'm not saying retirement's good. But if you're going to spend your retirement on you and not on the Lord's agenda, you're off, man. You're not thinking straight because it ain't about you. And here's another little thing. You stop working, you're probably going to die. Because when you lose your identity and you lose what you're doing and you have no purpose in life and you're floating around, one day you're fishing, one day you're golfing, one day you're this, one day you're that, and you have no purpose and meaning in life, the first thing that goes is your mind. You will start losing your mind. Second thing is you're going to lose your physical abilities. You're going to lose your legs. And then at that point, you're going to be riddled with all kinds of health issues. That's what the general pattern is when you stop working. Why do you think God wants us to work? And again, I'm not talking about manual labor, laying down bricks and digging ditches and stuff that you could do at 21. I'm not talking about that. But getting up in the morning and having a purpose of what do I need to do today? When you have no purpose, you will die early. And that is just statistics. I'm just telling you that. So a lot of these folks in their mindset have this dream idea that they're going to retire and it's going to be this wonderful next 30 years of paradise on earth. And I'm telling you, they got another thing coming. They have because the stats don't prove that. But that's what they're doing on their own personal life. They are building this economic security so they can retire early and do nothing. That's not a good plan. That is not a good plan. I would want to retire early so I can do more of the Lord's work. I can serve Him more. I can do this. I can do that. But if it's just to sit by the pool and sip iced tea, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. So again, that's what I'm talking about. It's not a man after God's own heart. It's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be like going into sin. It just means you're off. You're just doing your own agenda. You're doing your own thing. In your mind, you have it set what you think is right for you. And I'm not saying these people are sinning. They're not. They're just not on the right agenda. And it's not my purpose to tell them that. They have to figure that out between them and the Lord. But that's what I'm talking about. We have plenty of people in our church that are retired, and they serve like there's no tomorrow, man. They are some of the best servers we've ever had, and they're great, and they do wonderful, and they have a purpose, man, and they're using retirement properly, that they can serve the Lord more, and they're helping other people, and they're doing a lot. And we got tons of people in our church that do that. But again, I'm trying to hit my generation. It's not so much the boomers; it's my generation that's thinking like this. It's Generation X. It's the latchkey generation that's thinking like that. Look, I went to school with guys that had that same mindset. They wanted to make a lot of money by the age of 40 and then retire. And a lot of them went to Wall Street, and they worked like 100 hours a week, 110 hours a week was nothing. They slept in the office, they lived there, and a lot of them did make their millions by the age of 40. But they don't have anything as far as a family is concerned or anything. It's just, yeah, they have money. They retired to Florida, but they're not doing anything but eating soft serve ice cream and walking the mall. That's what they're doing. You know, you put on the white shoes and you retire to Florida, and you're like, that's what retirement for you was? Wow. Wear pants, checkered pants, and weird stuff like that, you know. It's my generation that's really bad on that one. Anyway, man after everyone's heart, God's own heart. The application for us, obviously, following God faithfully in His agenda and whatever that looks like for our lives. So we're always trying to ask the Lord, what do you want? What's your will for me? What's the next step that you want me to do? And He will show you. By the way, if you get on God's agenda, man, things really change, because when you, just from a psychological standpoint, when you get up in the morning and you have an agenda that you know is set by God, it gets you out of bed. It keeps depression at bay. It keeps anxiety at bay, and you really you feel energized. Well, I got to get this done today. I got to do this. I got to do that, and it really sets the tone for you. It actually helps you feel healthier from a psychological standpoint. It gets you motivated, and you have something to look forward to. I've talked to a lot of people that have no purpose. They don't even remember what day it is, guys. Do you know that? They're like, what it's today, like Friday? No, it's Tuesday. And what happens is they get so lost that every day turns into the same thing, because it's a rut. And you're sitting in front of the TV watching the Golden Girls all day long, and you start losing where you're at in life. You know what I'm saying? You don't even know what day it is. Is today Saturday? No, it's Monday. No. What happened? I don't know. Doing crossword puzzles all day long. So anyway, what's the direction of your life? Where is it going? What does the Lord want you to do on all seasons of life? You have to think in this term. Okay, I'm in this season now, but then the next season is going to have me do something different. And the next season is going to have me do something different. And every season builds on itself. Every season prepares you for the next season. And so you have to keep thinking, okay, what does He want? What does He want for me? And that's how you stay on this path of being a person after God's own heart. You're seeking what He wants, not what you want. Okay, let's go to another aspect of David. The sword shall never depart from your house, which was one of the penalties that's given to him from his sin with Bathsheba, and obviously covering up the death of Uriah by putting him on the front lines. And so this is one of the aspects of it. Okay, so to unpack this, you have to know what each word kind of means. It's an idiom, the sword shall never depart. It means that there's going to be bloodshed and strife within David's family. The concept of the sword, when you see the word sword in Scripture, when it's used metaphorically, it's the idea of violence and war and bloodshed when you see a sword, right? And never departs means a perpetual state, not just a one-time thing, will happen to David's family. That's pretty scary, guys. And then house, obviously, it's not David's building. The house is his dynasty, his lineage, his family that goes on and on and on and on. So the idea is, because of what David did, there will be strife and bloodshed in his dynasty perpetually. Oh, wow. So the implications are pretty scary when you think about that, because it doesn't just happen to David. It's the implications that anything we do outside of the will of God reverberates down through the ages and affects our descendants. And that's pretty scary. We sometimes don't understand the impact of what we have done and how it's affecting other people, how it makes other people feel, how it sets their course of life in different directions. We always think in terms of ourselves and not understanding the consequences of what we do as far as it affects other people. I'm sure David didn't think about that either, because that would be a barrier to think, well, I better not do this, because if I do this, it's going to affect my family for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so this is the picture of sin. That, like when I always say, you can't sin in a closet. It doesn't stay there. It goes out. Now, here's how it came out in David's life. It unfolded dramatically. First off, of Amnon and Tamar, you had incest going on and shame in David's house. Absalom then takes revenge on Amnon trying to rape Tamar and kills him. Then Absalom rebels against his own father, causes a civil war, right? And Absalom was eventually killed. Adonijah's coup had strife over succession after David's old age. And Solomon had him killed. And it continues on. In fact, after Solomon dies, the country divides into a civil war. It divides into two nations, Israel and then Judah. And Judah and Benjamin were together. So you had a civil strife that continues to happen. And so it's huge. And it's not actually rectified until Messiah gets here. And Messiah obviously is going to rectify it, and he will bring the two houses back together when he comes back. He'll bring the Judah and Benjamin back to the other tribes of Israel and connect them and rejoin them again. But even to this day, they are not joined. There are two houses of Israel. Even though we call them Israel, they're still two houses. And only Messiah will actually bring back unity. But that's what David's sin caused. Now, when we think about that, that's pretty scary. Now, like I told you, I this last spring I did a lot of studying in near-death experiences. And one of the things I picked up on, one of the commonalities, is when they're around Jesus, he does a life review of them. It's not a Bema Seat judgment, but it's a life review of their entire life. And that's a real common thing with near-death experiences. And when they do the life review, it's almost like they're watching their life in like a hologram. But one aspect they all mention, a commonality with all of it, is he shows them what they did right, and he shows them what they did wrong. And in both the positive and the negative aspects, they could see the impact of what their positive or negative actions did as it affected others generationally, if that makes sense. They saw what they did, how it affected their kids, grandkids, and beyond, how it just went out and spread. And they could see every detail of how their actions affected everyone around them. And that, for all of them that had this, and we're talking about 1,500 NDEs that this guy I was studying looked at, all of them had the same experience. So imagine if that's true, and you have a life review with the Messiah, and he shows you how the positive affected everybody, but then also shows you how the negative affected everybody around you. They said when they saw the negative and how it affected, it sobered them, man. It really, he didn't have to say a word to them. It just crushed them to actually see what their actions did to other people and how, and it's not just what they saw, it's they got to feel. They were able to feel what the other person felt by their actions, positively and negatively. Holy smokes. Holy smokes, that's kind of scary to me. That would be very sobering. Yeah, it'd be nice to see, how your positive thing affected people, but man, to take a look at the negative. Well, so when I look at that and I think about what the reverberations of what David did and how it affected negatively the nation of Israel and his dynasty, that's similar. That's the idea right there, that it just continues this trickle-down effect of affecting people. And so, yeah, wow. Pretty scary, pretty sobering to think about that. So the application then for something like this is the private sin creates a public fallout. No doubt about that. Fractures families, churches, and nations. There's no neutrality with sin. As you can see, the sword shows sin always has consequences, even though David was forgiven. He was forgiven of this, right? But the consequences follow it out. And this is the thing about, sometimes relationships. And so let me make a relational aspect or application to this. People do bad things to you. There's no doubt about that. And you do bad things to other people. No doubt about that. It's a two-way street. And we can forgive each other. You can forgive people that have done bad things to you, and they can forgive you, and that's fine, and that's good. But please do not think, just because forgiveness has been given, that there are not consequences that still remain because of that incident. There are some people you're going to have to forgive, but you will never see again. Okay? That's the way it is. And you have to be okay with that. Because forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. And I want to continue to harp on that over and over again. The world says forgive and forget. That's not true. You are never to forget. Why are you not to forget? So you don't get burned again. You forgive, but you don't forget, so you don't get burned. So you don't make the same mistake twice. And sometimes reconciliation is not possible. The person might be psycho. The person might be crazy. The person might be still dangerous to you, right? They're still dangerous to you. Can't trust them. So you can forgive and still not give trust. And I struggle with sometimes with couples in counseling because one person will do something really bad to the other person, and they're saying, well, she should forgive me or he should forgive me, and we should just move on. Well, it's not that easy, because whatever he did or she did, it's going to probably take about 2 years, maybe 3 years of building back trust. So that your spouse can trust you again. She can forgive you or he can forgive you right now, but trust is going to have to be re-earned again because you don't have any trust whatsoever. So, there is no neutrality in sin, and it does carry consequences, unfortunately. David, you look at him, a man of God, no doubt about that, heart for God, covenant, never went into idolatry or anything, but man, he never really had control of his family. He really lost it with his family. That was his weakness, no doubt about that. And that just shows you can still be a man of God and still have these deficits in your life. And I'm sure David would want to correct those things if he's looking back on his life. But again, you could still be a man of God and have deficits as long as your life is going in the right direction. David's life was his parenting was horrible. There's no doubt about that. His parenting was just off the chain. And I can kind of understand it in some sense and give David some grace because, he's running the kingdom. He's a king. I could imagine he's fighting a lot, and he didn't have a lot of time. I get it. I'm not trying to excuse it. But I can see David's life and where you can give him grace in understanding why he wasn't that great of a parent. Great leader, great king, but that doesn't equate to being a great parent. So, think about that a little bit in your application. One more thing, and then we'll quit on this last one, is called the still small voice. And this is probably the most misinterpreted passage up there with Jeremiah 29. The plans I have for you and stuff like that. And it's like, no, that's referring to Israel, not us. You see that on graduation cards all the time, you're right? People graduate, I have plans to prosper you and all that other stuff, and that's just directly to Israel. But anyway, the still small voice. A lot of people think that's God speaking to you in a still small voice in your house and in your prayer time. That's not what the still small voice is. The passage is in 1 Kings 19:12, and after the earthquake of fire, but the Lord was not in the fire, and after the fire, still small voice. And so it's God's quiet, subtle way of working, but it's through a group. Okay? So the still small voice is connected to a group. Elijah, if you remember the story, feels that he's alone. Remember? He had just had his showdown with the prophets of Baal and the fire that came down out of heaven, and he had won that, and then he slit their throats, 450 or something like that, for prophets of Baal. He killed them all, and then Jezebel goes after him, right, after that. And he goes to Mount Sinai in Midian, in Saudi Arabia, where Mount Sinai is. So he makes the trek all the way down there. And his whole mantra to God is, I'm alone. I'm the only one left. And God says, no. You're not the only one left. There's 7,000 in Israel who have not bowed a knee to Baal. You're not alone. And what we start realizing is this is the first teachings that come out about the remnant of Israel. That's the group it's referring to. Now, couple things. Let's go through this real quick. Then he said, go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, and behold, the Lord passed by. And a great strong wind tore into the mountains and broke the rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. So what you have to realize is there's a context behind this. It's not just referring to wind. It's not referring to an earthquake. It's not just referring to fire. These are referencing historical issues that are going on in Israel. That's what these are referencing about. So when it says that this strong wind broke into and tore into the mountains, that is a reference to the king Hazael of Syria that continued to break down Israel like wind against a mountain and just beat the thunder out of Israel over and over and over again, numerous times. That's the reference to King Hazael. And after the wind was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. The earthquake is the idea of splitting, right? That is a reference to what Jehu did, who caused a civil war in Israel. So he split the nation, Jehu did. So that's the idea of the earthquake. But again, the Lord's doing this in wind and earthquake, but it's a reference to things that are happening historically to Israel. And then after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. The fire is representative of Elijah. What was the miracle that happened? The fire came down and consumed the altar. The fire is related to Elijah. So you can see that these three aspects are relating to people or aspects of Israel's history in that context. That's what it's referring to, okay? And after the fire, a still small voice. So it's a whisper, a calm, small voice, in the Hebrew. So it was when Elijah heard it that he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. Suddenly a voice came to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he said, "I have been very zealous for the Lord of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left. They seek to take my life. Yet I have reserved 7,000 in Israel." This is the Lord responding to him. all whose knees have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. So the idea there is the still small voice is God's remnant, the 7,000 that have not bowed a knee to Baal. So after Elijah, the fire is the remnant. And what God was trying to say is, my remnant is not the ones that make the most noise and the most outward appearance, but my remnant is always there telling the truth. And that remnant is a still small voice. I speak through the remnant, but you have to really find the remnant if you want to hear me. I speak through them. Notice that in the earthquake, that in the wind, and in the fire, God did not speak through the elements, did he? There was no voice in it, right? It was God's judgment, civil war, and then obviously a miracle of fire coming down, but there's no voice in it. Where is the voice of God? It is through the remnant. That's who it's from. And so the still small voice is not God speaking to your heart. It is referring to the remnant. Now, let's make a second broader application. The church has a remnant too. Okay? I would consider Rock Harbor a remnant church, and there's a lot of remnant churches out there as far as that. But a remnant means a remnant. Remnant doesn't mean the whole, blanket. A remnant is a piece of the blanket, but the majority of the blanket is a non-remnant. And that's the way it was in Israel. That's the way it is today in the church. There's a very small piece, and the remnant is a cut-off piece of the blanket, and that represents the still small voice of God. So if anybody wants to hear the voice of God, God will not be in the earthquake of the mega churches. He will not be in Rick Warren's fire. He will not be in the Pentecostal fire, whatever, all the whiz-bang stuff going on. You will find God's voice in a remnant church in a still small voice, almost like a whisper. And you will have to strain to hear it because he is intentionally keeping it away from people unless they want it. Does that make sense? You have to want the truth. You have to seek it out. God doesn't just throw it out there for everybody. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. But he doesn't do information dumps. He refuses to do information dumps. But if you want to hear his voice, you have to find it, but it will only be found among the remnant. It will not be found in Joel Osteen's 70,000 megachurch. It's not going to be found there. The still small voice is the remnant churches that are preaching the word of God day in and day out, and that is where you find it. That's how you understand it. That's how it applies today. Everybody sitting here, is a remnant believer. In your family, if they want to know the truth, they will come to you. But they have to seek you out. Don't do information dumps. They know where to go. They want the voice of God. They'll come to you, and I'm sure you will give it to them. But you know and I know where most of your family are going to hear. They're going to where the wind is, they're going where the earthquake is, and they're going where the fire is. They don't look for the still small voice in the remnant. They look for the most whiz-bang, dramatic thing they could find for information. And it's not how you find it. For instance, you can go on YouTube and find the fire, the earthquake, and the wind on all the channels. But if you try to search for remnant voices on YouTube, it's going to be a little tough to find that remnant voice. You know why? Why do you think God makes it hard to find the truth? Doesn't he want everybody to know the truth? Of course he does. But why does he make it hard? Why do the most goofiest people on this planet have the biggest voices? How come the people that don't know the Bible but pretend to know the Bible have the biggest voices? Why? And when you hear them talk about the Bible, they're like idiots. They're like stupid. and biblically illiterate, but yet they're teaching the Bible online because that's the non-remnant. That's the non-remnant. And of course, Satan has no problem promoting them. But do you think he's going to promote the still small voice? No, he's going to hide it. And so the remnant's there, but you have to search it out. You have to seek it. You have to want it. And that's what God is expecting people to do. If you want the truth, it's there, but you better find it. It's going to be like finding gold. And to find gold, you have to mine for it. You have to dig and dig and dig and dig until you finally find a vein. And then you still have to pull that thing out. It's a lot of work to get the truth. So God is expecting people to work to find the truth. And they will find it in the still small voice, not in the big voices.
Hey everybody, I need your help. And I need your help in 3 different areas. First of all, I need your help on our channel. Our channel is working against an algorithm. And so we need you to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. And if you'll do that, that helps us get the message out to many people. It outdoes the algorithm that's working against us. So if you'll do those things, real simple, like, subscribe, hit the bell, it'll get our message out to as many people as possible. The second thing you could do to help us out is prayer. We get a lot of pushback online from not only human beings, but from the demonic realm as well. And so we need prayer. And so if you can pray for our ministry, that would greatly help us out. And third, it takes a lot of financial resources to put these programs on. And so we do a lot of filming, with a lot of editing, a lot of going on location. In fact, sometimes we film in Israel. And we film in Turkey and different places like that. And so it takes a lot of money to do these special programs that we put together. And so we need finances. And so if the Lord puts it on your heart to help us, that would be greatly appreciated by us and our ministry. So those are the 3 ways you can help us. Pray to the Lord how you could do that. Real easy. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, pray, and financially support us. God bless you. Thank you so much.